Welcome, everyone, to Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. We're your hosts and co-founders of FantasyForesight.com, coming to you from Rambo Fixture Company Studios. I'm Ben.
And I'm Jay.
You ready to get rolling, Jay?
You know it. Let's do this.
All right, let's go. And today we've got the wide receivers and the tight ends from the NFC South as of Monday, September 3rd.
Starting off, we're going to go with the cream of the crop in Atlanta. You have Julio Jones. I mean, he's been a PPR stud his entire career. We have him ranked as Total Foresight's WR6. He is going as WR4, so we have him a little behind that. Now, listen, he's a guy who has battled injury his entire career, but he has played through it for most of that time. But he always does seem to have a banged up wheel. You know, he always has ankle issues, and there are times when I feel like it affects the way he plays on the field, even though he plays through it. But he's still a stud at the end of the day. So I don't know. You know, Julio's one of those guys where he's an elite talent, he's an elite producer, but he still gives me this uncomfortable feeling.
You're absolutely right about everything you said, especially about the uncomfortable feeling, and yet he plays through all these injuries. He's always questionable right up to kickoff, but then he plays, and then sometimes he'll get you a monster week to win your week that week. So here's what I really want to talk about with you as far as Julio goes. We do this exercise for context with every player that we do. But this conversation is no more interesting to me than with Julio Jones when you consider the guys going around him in drafts. So let me ask you, Jay, you've got DeAndre Hopkins and Odell Beckham Jr. going in front of Julio. You've got Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen going behind him. Rank those 5 wide receivers for me this year in PPR formats.
Oh, God. I am probably going to go... Oh, man, this one's so tough.
I know.
I'm not a huge Odell guy. He is maybe the most talented receiver out of that group catching the ball.
Probably is, yeah.
But from a fantasy producer, that offense, I'm probably putting him last. I'm probably going Thomas or Allen with Hopkins, then Julio, then OBJ.
Interesting. Okay, I'm close to you, but I'm a little bit different. Okay. I do like Michael Thomas the most out of that group this year. Yeah. Second this year, I like DeAndre Hopkins.
Okay.
I think third, I like Odell because I trust Odell's self-love. And I think because he got paid and because he was injured last year, he's very self-motivated to come be a stud this year. And I have a lot of confidence in that coming to fruition. I will take Keenan Allen over Julio as well. And it comes down to that up and downness of Julio's game. And I know that he only had 3 touchdowns last year, and I know some positive TD regression is very likely this year. But at some point, all of this wear and tear on his body, where he is a game time decision week in and week out, that is going to catch up with him. You know, he has finished on average on a per game basis over the past 5 years as last year wide receiver 10. Before that, he was 4th, 2nd, 5th, and 2nd. So a couple of things. Number one, he's older. And number two, I just think that, I don't know. I just, like you said, there's just this inexplicable, uneasy feeling about Julio, despite his insane talent. And at that price, you have to be really nitpicky. And I just like him 5th out of the 5 wide receivers that we just discussed.
Well, we talked about it on a previous podcast about Alvin Kamara, how his ADP draft position is going a few spots behind where Total Foresight values him. So he does present value where he's going in drafts.
Yes, sir.
Julio's the opposite of that, where he is going on average at WR4, and Total Foresight has him ranked as WR6. Now, you look at that and you're like, well, I mean, that's pretty close. We're splitting hairs. But yeah, what that's telling you is you're overpaying just a tad for him in drafts where there is some better value out there.
Right. And you maybe you view that as an intentional calculated risk that you want to take. Sure. And that's fine if you feel that way. But if you are just going by the analytics and the probability and the statistics, it does tell us to shy away just slightly from that. Right. Now, on the positive side, I will say this is their 2nd year in that offense post Kyle Shanahan. So there's hopefully a little bit of familiarity and maybe a little bit of a step in progress that gets made on that entire offense. And Julio is not excluded from that, nor is his quarterback Matt Ryan. But you know, they still do have that great offensive line, third in the league. And Julio and the Falcons receivers have the seventh best strength of schedule at that position. So he's not going to face insanely challenging defenses week in and week out. The biggest thing for him is that durability. The closer to 100% that he can be starting this season and throughout this season, obviously the better chance he has returning as that like top 5 wide receiver and less of that like top 10 wide receiver.
Right. And the other two guys on this offense do present some value. You have Mohamed Sanu, who's been a fine fantasy producer. I mean, he's middle of the road. We have him ranked as our WR37. He's going undrafted, but he's good in spot duty. His final finishes, I mean, he's not going to be a steady producer for you all season where he's going to be a contributor to your championship run. But if you need spot duty from here to there, he's been perfectly fine. Yeah. I would probably tend to go with, if you're not going to take Julio Jones on this offense, I would probably tend to go with Calvin Ridley, who presents you some more upside being a high-end rookie. Now, he hasn't shown all that much so far as he's been getting going in the preseason with this offense, but it is notable that he was Dane Brugler's WR1 in his draft guide. So there is some expectation that he is going to do something, and he's going 116 to 121 in drafts. So there is some value there.
There is some value there. You like the fact that he could cut it for the extremely high standards of Nick Saban for 3 years at Alabama, in which time, not the most aggressive, pass-happy offense in the world. He still had, over 3 years, 224 catches for almost 2,800 yards and 19 touchdowns and 12.4 yards a carry. I just think if you can make it in Nick Saban's offense, you are very NFL ready coming out of college, no doubt. And he also is a beneficiary from that good offensive line and that favorable strength of schedule. And he's going later. I agree. If you're going to draft a non-Julio Jones wide receiver from this team, this is the guy you take. But I think Mohamed Sanu is the safer bet for you if you need, like Jay said, some spot duty for a bye, an injury, some emergency situation, what have you. He's going to give you that 8 or 9 points pretty steadily as a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type. So not somebody worth rostering, but somebody out there for you if you need him. Calvin Ridley, on the other hand, has the potential to step into the second primary pass catching role in that offense and could really return value being drafted at wide receiver 48. The only hesitancy I have taking him there are the guys going in front of him. The guys going behind him don't do much for me, but the guys going in front of him, Kelvin Benjamin, I think he's going to have a nice bounce back year being the primary weapon in that passing offense, and he's completely healthy. So I think he's got something to prove. And then our guy, Keelan Cole, I mean, he is a stud in the making, and I would take either one of those guys at Calvin Ridley at this point. But if you get to like the 125 range and you're looking for a speculative wide receiver ad and Cole and K-Benj are both gone, I have no problem with you rolling the dice on Calvin Ridley.
No. I would reach on Cole. I would maybe reach a little bit on Kelvin Benjamin. But as this is showing us, if those guys are gone and you are left with what's left, then Calvin Ridley is a perfectly fine take at that point.
Yeah, and I think that'll take care of the wide receivers for the Falcons. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, you got Mr. Devin Funchess, who, last year he kind of burst onto the scene, finished wide receiver 21, average fantasy points per game. He finished as wide receiver 25. He, at least right now, is still the primary wide receiver in that offense. He's total Foresight's wide receiver 31. So in 12-team leagues, that's a very solid middle-of-the-road wide receiver 3, which you need in order to win your league. And let's take a look at where he's going. He's being drafted as wide receiver 35. So like Jay has mentioned previously, there's a little bit of value baked into his price already. And his price is 85 to 90. Going ahead of him, you've got Alshon Jeffrey, injured, going to be out a few weeks, and Robbie Anderson. Going behind him, you've got Randall Cobb and Sammy Watkins. The only guy that I definitely want more than Devin Funchess in that group is Robbie Anderson, and maybe Alshon because of the perceived upside when he comes back based on the quality of his team. Randall Cobb, ouchie. Sammy Watkins, ouchie. I don't want anything to do with either one of them.
I completely agree. Can't argue with any of that. But the guy on this team that I think does present maybe a little bit more value is DJ Moore. I think he's shown what he's going to be in this preseason already. I think he looks like the elite receiving talent on this team, and he is going later in drafts. He's going 126 to 131 as a WR51.
And before we go any farther with DJ Moore, I just want to take a step back from a philosophical standpoint. Like Jay just mentioned, DJ Moore probably carries more upside. DJ Moore is going later in drafts and probably carries more potential value. But based on how your draft has gone, should determine whether or not you want more of a steady Eddie type at the point where you would take Devin Funchess because you have rolled the dice on some riskier plays and some higher upside guys, and now you want, a little bit more steady, comfortable guys. Maybe that's where you take Devin Funchess. Whereas if conversely, your entire draft has been really safe to that point, and now you want to start taking some risks and rolling the dice, maybe DJ Moore is your point.
If you're looking at Devin Funchess, who's a WR3, as we've said, and you're looking to draft that position for your team, I mean, if you're looking at a WR3/flex spot, are you going to go maybe more reliable Devin Funchess, or are you going to go higher upside DJ Moore? And in that position, I'd rather go with the upside.
Well, I will say that there is also some upside with Devin Funchess. He finished at wide receiver 21 last year. That's a wide receiver 2. Yeah. So I think if he's being drafted as wide receiver 35, there is some upside because he just showed us last year that he can realize a ceiling of 21. And I don't think that that's necessarily his talent ceiling. He is a big wide receiver that can make some good catches in traffic. He is going to benefit from North Turner coming to town. So I think Devin Funchess is somebody that could surprise people a little bit this year. And I do like DJ Moore, and I respect Dane Brugler and how high he had DJ Moore rated in his draft guide this year. But I just think we shouldn't be too quick to dismiss Mr. Scrumptious Devin Funchess.
No, you're probably right. And the other thing that these guys do have going for them is their offensive line is putrid. So they're probably going to be behind in games and trying to claw back into games. They're expected to win less than 8 games according to Vegas. So there is going to be some passing volume. And at least to start, it looks like Devin Funchess and DJ Moore are going to present value to you if you're still drafting and going forward.
Agreed. So I think we can move on from the Carolina wide receivers. I think I want to switch it up a little bit. Okay. Last couple of episodes, we've had to end with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think we save New Orleans for last and we go into Tampa Bay first. Yeah. So to start, it's not all bad. You do have Mike Evans. He's Total Foresight's ranked wide receiver 14, and he's going 24 to 26 in drafts currently as wide receiver 10. Now, Mike Evans has had an up and down career. He's been a real conundrum when it comes to fantasy. He burst onto the scene his rookie season as wide receiver 13, and then he followed that up by dropping down to wide receiver 23. Followed that up by being wide receiver 3, and last year he dropped back down to wide receiver 17. Now, I understand that he is an elite talent. I understand that he has elite wide receiver 1 upside. However, he has not been able to put that all together on a consistent basis for whatever reason, whether it's things going on around him or things to do with his individual game. When you look at his past 4 years, as far as average fantasy points per game, he has finished 20th, 2nd, 26, and 13. Which of those seasons is the outlier there?
Man, I mean, it's the one where he's second, but he is just such a mystery. He is an immense talent. He made Johnny Football by bailing him out consistently.
Yes, he did.
Watching this guy in person, he's a monster. He can catch the ball in double teams. He can do anything you ask him to do except be a reliable, consistent, top-end fantasy producer. It just hasn't happened yet. And I people keep reaching on him, and you want to trust him and you want him to be that guy, but he just hasn't been that yet.
And he's not too far off from that yet. Right. But the price for that elite guy and the guy that's not too far off is very different. Okay. And I think when you look at where he's going right now, 24 to 26 as wide receiver 10, where we have him as wide receiver 14, his price is already inflated, just like Jay alluded to. And then when you look at who's going ahead of him, you've got A.J. Green, Tyreek Hill, we both love, and I think his upside is immense this year. Yeah. Stephon Diggs, if he can ever stay healthy, has unlimited potential. And then you've got T.Y. Hilton, who is really, in my opinion, dependent on the quality of Andrew Luck's game.
Well, and I think Mike Evans is kind of right there in that T.Y. Hilton category, where they have immense talent, but there's just always some kind of question mark preventing them from truly being a reliable WR1.
I think this year for me, it's Tyreek Hill, A.J. Green, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, and T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah, the other receivers on this team, Deshaun Jackson, look, I like Deshaun. He's been a fun player over the years, but I'm just not sure he presents any value to your fantasy team this season.
And to that point, reports are already that he'd be gone this year if not for his contract situation. He's being used more in the slot. He's going to split snaps in the slot with Adam Humphries and yield to Chris Goodwin, who the team views as a more complete wide receiver. So I really don't see much value for him in fantasy this year at all.
No, he could play some spot duty for your lineup, but honestly, I think there's probably better spot duty or players that could fill in on a bye week or due to injury at some point during the season for your team. Now,
and we haven't touched on the fact that they have a bad offensive line, and then they have a lower half of the league strength of schedule at the wide receiver position.
Now, Chris Godwin is somebody that I do like a lot and I think does present some value. He's in his second year in this offense and in the league, and I think he is a very talented receiver. But my problem is he has some value where he's going in drafts. He's going 136 to 141, very late. But the guys going around him are Tyler Lockett, Anthony Miller, Cam Meredith, Geronimo Allison. I mean, you've got guys also with a ton of value. So does he belong in that group? Yeah, I think he does belong in that group, sure. But there's tons of value. So if you're going to take him there, great, more power to you.
Yeah, the thing that I will say about Chris Goodwin before we move on to the Saints is that in college, in his last 2 years at Penn State, he averaged over 1,000 yards a season and 16 yards per reception. Okay, last year in his limited duty, he still averaged over the course of the season 15.4 yards a reception. So what that tells me is that he does have big play capability that should not be overlooked. It seems like a consistent part of his game. And if he is able to take that step as the organization believes that he has, then, I mean, he could really return some value this year. But I agree with you. I cannot take him over Tyler Lockett. When you're talking about the other three, and Anthony Miller, Cam Meredith, and Geronimo, there's speculation in all three of those guys. So if you want to take Chris Goodwin over any of those three, I'm fine with that. But for me, this group has got to be capstoned by Tyler Lockett, and it's not close.
Yeah, no, I agree. And really, when I look at Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, they are two very similar players that can high point the ball. They can go up and get it. They are very athletic, large bodies, and it just frustrates me to no end that this offense can't produce with this kind of talent on it.
And that's why we switched it up, because now we've got an offense that doesn't frustrate anybody at all in the New Orleans Saints. And their top wide receiver, Michael Thomas, is a wide receiver one stud that people are just now catching up to.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know why people are late to this game or devalue him. We have him ranked as our WR5. He is going as WR5 in drafts. So he is very appropriately priced. He has never finished so far in his 2 years in the NFL lower than WR7 overall.
Just say that. Let's just stop right there for 1 second. I don't want to overlook that. He's been in the NFL 2 years, and his worst finish is 7. Okay, go ahead.
Right, no. And he's improved. He's gone from WR7 to WR6. We project him as WR5. Do you see where we're going with this?
Exactly. He's got a Hall of Fame quarterback who still threw the ball 72% accuracy last year. And to be honest, Michael Thomas didn't have a lot of complimentary help. And if Cam Meredith can come back and be the guy that he hopes he can be, and everybody has been projecting him to be since day one, then, he could get just that much softer of some defensive looks that could really free him up to have that elite next step.
Yeah, and you have Ted Ginn there who presents some fun kind of flyer value there on the outside, and he can hit some home runs for you with his speed. But yeah, Michael Thomas is the elite talent on this team. I think he's very appropriately priced where he's going in drafts. Like Ben said, sky's the limit for him, and I think he's a great add to any fantasy team and can help you win a championship. Now, Cam Meredith and Ted Ginn, they are great players. They will provide you some value because, as we believe, this offense is going to put up yardage and points. so
Yep.
they are going to present some value. But to me, they're just a little bit of a wait and see. One, Cam Meredith, if he's going to really truly be healthy and be back, and Ted Ginn, how consistent he can be. I mean, he's a great person to have on your bench for spot duty or to pick up as a free agent. But as far as standalone, ongoing, consistent, high-end value, I'm probably just waiting on that or going a different direction than those two.
I can understand that, but Ted Ginn was a back-end wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. I don't think that's very fluky for him, and I think in this offense at this stage in his career, he definitely has the potential to be around there, but I agree with you. He's somebody that you can get as a late bench round type guy.
Right.
You know, he's somebody that's nice depth for you, but not somebody that you have to go out and get. And honestly, I think if you're going to throw a dart in this offense, you know, Cam Meredith isn't going much higher than Ted Ginn, who's going for free.
Right.
Cam Meredith is going as wide receiver 57 around the 140s, and you're taking a dart throw amongst him, Anthony Miller, Chris Godwin, Geronimo, or John Ross.
Yeah.
So out of those guys that we just talked about, I would say that the best offense of that is probably New Orleans. I know they've got Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay, but top to bottom, New Orleans offense is much better to me, in my opinion. So I like to take the stab on that best situation. And nobody's ever disputed the talent of Cam Meredith. It's just been a matter of, can he stay healthy and put it all together? So if you don't want to take a dart throw or a stab at the high-end price of Michael Thomas, the other way to go in this backfield is on the opposite end with Cam Meredith. But before we wrap up this episode, I don't believe that we discussed the guys going around Michael Thomas at his 15 to 17 price. And a great way to transition into the tight ends would be to discuss who we would take in what order amongst Michael Thomas, Odell, Julio, Keenan Allen, and Devontae Adams.
I'm taking Michael Thomas in front of all four of those players.
And it's not even difficult, is it?
No,
and you
no.
feel comfortable about it.
Right. No, I struggled with Julio and where I would take him in that group. I don't struggle at all with Michael Thomas. He would be my choice.
Yeah, I agree. So with that, we can move on to the tight ends in a much more excitable, good mood, because we didn't end with Tampa Bay. First up, we've got Atlanta, and we've got Austin Hooper.
Yeah, you know, he's a name that you always see come up. He scores touchdowns. He saw tremendous improvement to year 2. He was tight end 38 in his rookie season. He improved to tight end 17 in his sophomore campaign, and I think that improvement continues, obviously not at that same clip, but I think he does have some value there. Now, we have him ranked as our tight end 22, but that is an offense where you have an aging star who always is hobbled. You have a rookie that has yet to show that he's fully ingrained in that offense, and you have some running backs that also have some injury concerns, so you do have one consistent player there besides Mohamed Sanu in Austin Hooper in that offense, and he can present you some value.
Right, and I think with Matty Ice's 20 touchdowns last year, there's legitimate potential for that to go up 8 to 10, to 28 to 30 range.
Sure.
And Austin could certainly be one of the beneficiaries of that. And he was, let's just look at the tight end position for a second. Rookies hardly ever do anything in the league. And it isn't till about their third year that they really start to have a big time fantasy impact and really realize whatever potential that they're going to have.
Yeah.
This is his third season. He did double up in his efficiency and productivity last year from year 1 to year 2. If he can do that yet again this year, that's going to take him inside the top 10 to be a low end tight end 1.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think there's some high end value. He's going undrafted. You're going to look at some other names initially, but he could be someone to keep an eye on that could surprise this season.
Yeah, he's definitely a sleeper to keep your eye on for sure, just like Jay said. Moving on to the Carolina Panthers, you've got Greg Olsen, who's coming off of an injury, but I mean, he's tried and true at the position as you get.
Yeah, the only thing that makes me worry about Greg Olsen was he contemplated retirement after his injury last season. Now, it's his first major injury. I can certainly understand being down. He's been in the league forever. He's been one of the top players at his position for a very long time. Like Ben said, he has been a top-end tight end 1 for the duration of his career. So I can understand evaluating where you are in your life and wondering whether or not you should should go through the rigmarole of rehab and coming back into this league to be the player that you were. But the fact that that enters your mind, I always hear players that have retired say the second that that doubt creeps in, that's when you should hang it up. So that is the only reason for concern. Do I question Greg Olsen, his ability, or the player? No, I just worry about whether or not mentally he still wants to do it.
I hear those concerns. I will give you the opposite view based on that scenario and say that from a guy who has had as outstanding of an NFL career as he's had, he doesn't want to go out like he went out last year. He doesn't want to go out on injury. He doesn't want to go out being some irrelevant second tier tight end. No, he wants to go out the way that he's came in and the way that he's performed his entire career. So the fact that he has made the decision to come back after he has contemplated retirement tells me, with a guy specifically like Greg Olsen, who the kind of character he is, the kind of work ethic that he has and the pride that he takes. And you could see last year down the stretch and in the playoffs, the guy's barking on the sidelines because they're losing and because he needs to be more involved and all that. Like, he hasn't lost his passion whatsoever. I think he doubted his ability to perform at the level that he's accustomed to, and he was contemplating whether or not he wanted to be frustrated with that piece of it. But I think his decision to come back tells me that he thinks he can still cut it, and I think that this could be his last season, but one in which where he wants to go out the way that he's always played.
Well, and I think Total Foresight has some of that risk baked into its ranking because they have him ranked now way back at tight end 21. So there is some risk there, but like Ben said, if he does come back, and if he is the Greg Olsen of old, which he was his entire career, right now he's going 55 to 60 in drafts as tight end 5, then there's tremendous value there because he should be a top 3 tight end with the likes of Gronk and Kelsey.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple years ago before he got injured, he was tight end 3, So, guys going around him are Ertz and Jimmy Graham and Trey Burton and Evan Ingram. Trey Burton, I know there's a lot of hype and a lot of excitement there. We haven't seen anything yet. I just don't know.
And we need to know if Ingram can do it without the volume share he saw last season.
Exactly. And now Jimmy Graham, that's a little bit of a different conversation. I think he's going to be the primary red zone threat in that offense. And we talked about Jimmy Graham recently, that he has actually surprised us and how much he hasn't fallen off over the past couple of years after that first initial disappointing year in Seattle. And then you've got Ertz, who, I mean, you can't really argue with Ertz being the guy that you take out of that group. But I will say, then you have a very strong decision to make between Greg Olsen and Jimmy Graham.
I think he's priced right in that group. I think it's appropriate with the risk that he presents coming off of injury and everything else we've discussed. So I think he's a fine value. I think he's going very appropriately priced there.
Yeah, I think we can move on to Tampa Bay real quick before we hit on the Saints as we close out this episode and look at, they have O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate.
Look, I like both guys. I like their receiving core. I like these two tight ends. But last season, they were tight end 21 and tight end 13 respectively. I just don't know how much high-end value they present to me.
Yeah, if they were combined into one person, I'd be a lot more excited about them. But right. I mean, they're both talented enough where you can't ignore that as a team. So both guys are going to play and eat into each other's upside a bit. Now, O.J. Howard has looked really strong in the preseason. O.J. Howard is the guy that they've recently taken at 12 overall in the first round. So I think the organization is much more likely to go in his direction than they are Cameron Brate's. But if he fails to take another step and Brate just continues to be that reliable guy that he showed to be last year, then I don't know what might
happen. Honestly, I don't trust anything that organization is doing right now. O.J. Howard is he is the physically superior athlete of that tandem. But then they go out and pay Cameron Brate like he is the tight end 1 in that offense. So I don't know how you split the volume between these two talented guys. Cameron Brate is a great tight end. He's very reliable and he can catch the ball. But you have both of these immense talents in the same offense that continues to frustrate fantasy players and its fans.
I completely agree with you. I will say, if you disagree with Jay and you like one of these guys, the price is appropriate. It's pretty much free for both of them.
Yeah.
You've got OJ Howard going in the 150s and you got Cam Brate going undrafted. So if you think me and Jay are crazy and you think one of these guys is a stud just waiting to break out, you don't have to invest very much at all to try and prove your point. We are just going to respectfully disagree and go in a different direction. And even to the point of somebody as under the radar as Benjamin Watson for the Saints.
Yeah, Ben Watson is one guy who has quietly put together quite a career both on the field and in fantasy. And you know his name, but his name is never mentioned with the others at the top end of this position. And yet, he has put together great finishes, although he was injured for a season, and I wonder if that is what causes this.
That's it right there. I mean, he's not the youngest guy in the world as far as NFL players go, and he did have that injury a couple of years ago, but here's what he did in New Orleans the year prior to that injury. He was tight end 7. Yeah. Then he got injured for a season, and then he resurfaced in Baltimore last year. Nobody's nearly as excited about Baltimore's offense as they would be for New Orleans. And the guy still coming off injury at his age, downgrading to that offense, finished as tight end 11, people. And guess what? Now he's back with Drew Brees. And I think he's poised to just go back and realize that nice top 10 tight end upside this year.
Yeah. And Ben has mentioned it before that we refer to total foresight as the cold hard truth.
Yep.
Now you have Ben Watson and Greg Olsen both coming off injured seasons. Total foresight has Ben Watson ranked as tight end 9, and it has Greg Olsen ranked as tight end 21. That's what it sees as Ben Watson coming back into this offense and what is expected to be there. And he is currently going undrafted. You want to talk about some possible high-end value.
And this is reflected by me. I took him on my team in King of the Draft. I waited really, really long on tight end because I knew that we had a total foresight top 10 tight end going for free, and he's going to return to most people a very surprising value this year. Not to us. We see it coming because of fantasy foresight and because of total foresight.
Yeah, I mean, he presents tremendous value. I mean, he is on no one's radar on one of the best offenses in the NFL. It's really surprising how no one is talking about this guy. So mark it down. We are. The season has yet to kick off. Take this guy. If you can stash a backup tight end on your bench, if you want to stream a guy late or take a guy real late to throw in that position, go with Ben Watson.
Yeah, and when you talk about the game within a game and the strategy for a second, if you have somebody on your roster at the end of your bench going into kickoff of week 1 that you're pretty confident that you are going to drop, that you don't have a lot of faith in many good things happening for that player going into week 1, I recommend dropping that player before the games kick off and before waivers become active, and you pick up a speculative guy like a Ben Watson as a free agent before kickoffs. Then, because all you did was drop somebody you were going to drop anyways, and then if he blows up and all of a sudden he's the fantasy darling that week and he's the hot waiver commodity, he's not your hot waiver commodity. He's your free agent that you took as a speculative ad before kickoff. He blew up. You can either keep him if your other tight end didn't perform, or you can go identify somebody who had a very disappointing tight end week or maybe a tight end injury or something and target them for a trade.
I love it. Yep, that is the game, man. You save your waiver position or your budget. You can go out. You can leverage him either on your own team or leverage him on somebody else's team who has a weakness. And I was going to say, if you're somebody who took like a Zach Ertz, who we could see some possible regression this season, high end in the draft, and then you back Zach Ertz up with Ben Watson very late, well then Zach Ertz has name panache. He has value in that name. So you could then end up using, once the season gets going and you see that Ben Watson is producing at a high level, and then you have 2 tight ends, go trade the big name for as much value as possible in return, and then you can take the guy that you took late in a draft that nobody else saw coming.
Absolutely. And I think that is a great point, and that is a great way for us to end this this episode and for us to really get ready to roll into the season. This is going to be the last episode of this kind this year until next year when we start preparing you for 2019's fantasy draft. Now, from here on out, you're going to hear from us a preview episode of the season opener on September 6th of the Falcons and the Eagles playing each other to kick off the NFL season. Then after that, we're just really going to be focusing on weekly previews of matchups prior to kickoff, weekly summaries to summarize what we learned, as well as waiver and trade targets, and just discussing more of that game within the game as the season rolls on.
Oh man, I cannot wait to finally get going. I have enjoyed these preview episodes. It's been a lot of fun to go through each team and look at every player by position, but boy, I cannot wait to actually get started, and let's start playing some meaningful games.
That's right. 3 days away, ladies and gentlemen, and the NFL season is back.
Here we
Thanks
go.
for joining us, and have a great night.
And that wraps up this episode of Fantasy Foresight, the podcast. Don't forget, you can find us at fantasyforesight.com.
And you can use the links at the bottom of the page to find us on social media. Follow us on Twitter at ForesightBen, at ForesightJ, and at Total Foresight. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.
You already found this podcast, but you can find it on Google Play and iTunes, and you can find our app in the App Store.
All right, that does it for us. We'll see everybody next time. Thanks a lot, and have a great night.